Is Jesus the one? We pick it up here in chapter 11 and verse 2. Now when John, while imprisoned, heard of the works of Christ, he sent word by his disciples and said to him, "Are you the expected one, or shall we look for someone else?" Jesus answered and said to them, "Go and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, and the lame walk. The lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And blessed is he who does not take offense at me." So the first question has to do with the identity of Messiah, and it's a question that's actually voiced by John the Baptist himself. Why did they reject John and Jesus? He wasn't offering what they were interested in. He was offering the truth, and they would rather have a lie. It's interesting here, by the way, in verse 24. It will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom in the day of judgment. What's interesting about that to me is it's saying that Sodom is going to be in a day of judgment. That God's judgment on Sodom when he destroyed the city and all of its residents and inhabitants, men, women, children, animals, everything, was not the real judgment. It was merely a down payment, a precursor of the judgment to come. There is a day of judgment coming. A day of judgment. It's future. The judgment that Jesus is speaking of here is we find with further revelation, and we find it in the book of Revelation, chapter 20. It is the judgment of the great white throne. It is that time still distant, when God will raise from the dead all those who have rejected him, from Cain on. And they will be judged for the deeds that they have done. And they will be cast eternally into the lake of fire. The judge punishes based on neglected opportunity. Said another way, there are degrees of punishment. Degrees of punishment. The more you know, the more you're accountable for what you know. And the more you ignore what you are that you know, the greater will be your condemnation. That's a pretty sobering thought. It's a pretty sobering thought. The gospel is good news. The word means good news. But it's only good news to those who believe it. To those who reject it, it is the absolute worst news possible. Because what it means is that if you reject the Lord Jesus Christ, there is nothing left for you. Nothing. And the longer you hear it and harden yourself against it, the more serious will be your judgment. That's why the Apostle Paul says that in the day of salvation, do not harden your heart. And then he says, behold, now is the day of salvation. Today is the day to believe on the Lord Jesus Christ. Listen. If fierce wrath and judgment will come upon those cities of Galilee, what will come upon this country? What will come upon your neighbors, your family members, your co-workers who know the truth and refuse it? It's a sober, sober thought. Christianity is not optional. It is mandatory. We live in a country in which we have a freedom of religion. Our Constitution says you can believe whatever you want or nothing at all, right? And I'm glad, by the way, that we live in such a nation. But God didn't write that Constitution. God never says you can believe whatever you want or nothing at all. God says, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and you shall be saved. May God grant you the grace to do so.